Hi there. This is a review for The Dark Crystal. This movie came out in 1982, and this is the one of the few movies that's ever been made that did not feature any real actors in it. It's all puppeteers. Not too many films have been done this way. This came out at a particular time in the early 80s, so it came in the tracks of like the Muppet Show and such. Similar people involved in it. Same guys that did Yoda did this. But yeah, the Dark Crystal is about basically a pile of a group of creatures. The story starts with the fact that apparently there was a race and or there was a dark crystal. There was a crystal, and the crystal got cracked, and two races formed. And that's how we get our story flowing. Is basically there's the evil Skeksis and the good mystics, and basically there is the Gelflings. The Gelflings are supposed to be the I don't know the concept of what's going to happen in the future. Gelflings are a concept that they're going to put an end to this. But unfortunately, neither the Skeksis or the Mystics quite understand seemingly what is coming that's going to cause this problem or cause a rift. The Skeksis are all worried because, of course, they think it's their destruction, and so they go out of their way to try and eliminate the Gelfling species from the planet. This is not Earth. This is a different planet. It's of course a fantasy-esque story, so of course it's fantasy everywhere. It's kind of an amazing puppetry work, though. Everything's a puppet. Everything's a puppet. Um, Quite interesting characters and creatures are in this movie. And we get lots of interesting things. It's different kinds of stories, different kinds of ideas. But yeah, the Gelflings, they're a stereotype, of course. I won't get into what stereotype they represent. They, of course, represent a stereotype in this movie. And there's other stereotypes too. The Skeksis represent a stereotype. But more or less, the Gelflings are trying eked out a race. They're the last. There's like only like one or two of them left. Hardly any of them left. In fact, the Mystics are on their way out too. It's interesting. Every Skeksis who dies, an equal Mystic dies too, because Mystics and the Skeksis are connected. Um, but yeah, there's only two. There's only like two Gelflings left, I think. And more or less, the one Gelfling has to go on a bit of an adventure because he's got to find out a way to deal with the Dark Crystal, I believe. More or less, the Dark Crystal is in trouble because it's running out of energy, and the Skeksis have been using it for energy source for years and years and years to rejuvenate themselves. This is a classic story, of course, where there's a misunderstanding because the Skeksis are all worried that if they don't, basically, like the Skeksis have been using the Gelflings for energy. The Gelflings and the Dark Crystal for energy. They need the Gelflings for energy. They need the Dark Crystal for energy. They're trying to find a way to rejuvenate themselves. There's lots of puppet work in various parts of the film, and it particularly follows a lot of different story concepts. But nonetheless, this is one of those classic stories that at the end of the film, you find out what's actually been happening is that more or less these creatures, the Skeksis and Mystics, are actually a split of a race that once existed, and the crystal got cracked and their essence got divided. Long story short, the Skeksis have a complete misunderstanding of what it means when the Gelflings are going to fix the problem. They think the Gelflings are out to destroy them, and they don't realize that the Gelflings actually have to complete the puzzle, so to speak. They have to put the last piece of the crystal back. I think if the Skeksis knew that, they wouldn't have done any of the things. Unfortunately, because the way the crystal cracked, because of they have no concept of what actually happened. The Mystics seem to know this information. The Skeksis seem to be afraid of everything. There was a miniseries that came out a few years ago, Dark Crystal. I forget what the other part of it called, but it's just the fact that it was the same story. It was a prequel to this of how the Skeksis go after the Gelflings. More or less, this is the problem. The biggest problem in this film is that like the Gelfling goes on a big tour per se. He has to go on an adventure and go through a bunch of people. He finds a crazy whack ass scientist who decides to do something, and a crazy whack scientist who knows some stuff. Apparently knows the position of the stars in the universe, something like that. Doesn't really matter because basically this person knows the story, knows what that has to be done. Creates a bit of a problem because of course different things happen. The Skeksis are sort of so afraid of the Gelflings they keep having to look around for them too, so they send their minions after them. In a way, this is like watching The Wizard of Oz almost, where you got Dorothy that has to come in and try and correct a mistake that was made. In this case, it's the Gelflings. But nonetheless, it's an amusing situation. And more or less, yeah, the story sort of ends because like the one Gelfling finds another Gelfling and they match make and do all things together. But of course, it turns out that she ends up dying at the end because in order to complete the crystal, she has to be killed. Um, but yeah, this movie is kind of like another dark fantasy movie. There was a lot of these movies made in the 80s. In fact, I find it amusing how many of these movies were made. The pleasantness of the 1970s gave way to the stationary problems of the 1980s. The 1980s became a time of Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and what is it? There's a whole bunch of movies made in the 80s that are all dark fantasy. It's quite a kind of a shift track. I'm not sure exactly when this happened. Actually, I think it happened not too long after the 80s started. You basically had Indiana Jones, and you had Dark Crystal, and you had just numerous films made. Conan the Barbarian was along this lines because instead of a light fantasy tale of the 70s, you had dark fantasy. But nonetheless, it all went well. I think the biggest problem with the film is that they don't know precise like they. I think the biggest problem with this film is that they. That is like the Skeksis really don't understand their problem, and of course they're a stereotype for something that's supposed to be the in joke for what the Gelflings represent. The Gelflings are supposed to represent fixing the problem and giving unity to somebody. But this is all silliness, of course, because they don't ever explain what happened to the crystal that cracked it in the first place. They don't really talk about it. I think what the joke was is that the original race of beings got a little bit too arrogant, or what is the term? Too complacent, and their complacency led to the crystal breaking, and that's when they switched, and that's when they split, and it creates a problem for them because they have to figure out they can't tell the Skeksis or the Mystics all the story. The Mystics seem to know what's going on. They seem to know that there has to be a reformation. It's not entirely clear how they. Actually, I'm not sure that they know anything. But yeah, it's a wonderful story about the Skeksis and about Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. Lots of silly looking creatures, funky. A lot of different creativity in this movie, we'll say. Lots of creativity in this movie. A lot of different creative features and animals. Some of them are based on Earth creatures, some not, but nonetheless, yeah, it's not too bad. I think the only problem of the film is like, oh yeah, the two main Gelflings, Jen and Kira, are the two main story points. The problem is that because it takes so long because it's not until the end that we really find out what actually happened. Um, it becomes a problem scenario. Is that they got to figure out. I mean, if the Skeksis knew what the actual point was, I don't know if they would have been trying to get rid of the Gelflings. But I guess that's the point of the story: is that the Skeksis represent a stereotype of sorts, and that's pr- supposed to be the joke of the stereotype is that people doesn't understand that they're supposed to be trying to unite. Nonetheless, it works out in the end. It's a pretty good story. It's a dark fantasy movie. I think that's the thing about these films is that they're different to watch nowadays. These days, you don't have a lot of puppetry. When Dark Crystal Age of Resistance came out, it kind of came out of left field because we hadn't seen anything like that in a long time. There's not a lot of puppet work. Puppet work has been totally replaced with CGI visuals, and therefore I think a good chunk of the people who are watching this were merely just the people from the old days rewatching the show in order to recollect about the Dark Crystal. It was actually funny how they actually managed to get the miniseries made in the first place. But yeah, I it's a good movie. Maybe not great, but pretty good movie. It gets its point across. It's got a pretty good point to make. Yeah, Dark Crystal. Definitely. I don't know. It depends on what you want to have your kids seeing, but it's definitely supposed to be for kids. I think the only problem is the fact that there is only puppetry and there's no real people in it. But the puppets do a pretty good job of emoting. They hook them up properly. Nonetheless, yeah, Dark Crystal.